I just want to warn you that this review is longer than most, so sit back, open a drink, and strap yourself in, because this is going to be a long journey. Aw, what a cute squirrel. He looks so innocent and carefree. Wait, what are you doing? No, oh God, no.
Stupid.
Conker's Bad Fur Day. A classic game released at a bad time on a console it wasn't ready for. Oh, the irony. Conker's Bad Fur Day was released for the Nintendo 64 in the spring of 2001, during a time where the console race was shifting rapidly to the next generation. What with the PlayStation 2 already out in stores, and the GameCube to follow up right after, Conker already found itself in an uphill battle. This game was so vulgar and adult for its time, the advertising campaign for the game only appeared during the hours most people were asleep, and on channels mainly for adults. Some retailers didn't even display the game, and you had to ask specifically for it. A few retailers refused to sell the game, and even Nintendo themselves declined to acknowledge the game in its own magazine publication, Nintendo Power. The game was the last to be published by Rareware for the Nintendo 64, and was considered by most accounts to be a commercial failure. The game was pretty costly at the time, being one of only 3 games to use a 64 megabyte cartridge. Well, 4 if you count the European version of Paper Mario. Combined with the lack of advertising and the core player base of the Nintendo 64 being geared towards a younger audience, it's not hard to see why this game is such a commercial failure. I have to mention, this game is not a game you buy for your kids. I repeat, this is not a game you buy for your kids. I wouldn't recommend buying it for your mom either. Maybe your dad, if he's, that kind of dad. Did I mention it's not for kids? Yeah, Conker's Bad Fur Day is a gross and disgusting game disguised under some cute packaging. And man, were some parents surprised when they saw what they had actually bought little Johnny. The game begins with an amazing spoof of the movie A Clockwork Orange, with Conker on a throne surrounded by some strange characters and nothing but a glass of milk in his hand. Importantly enough, this tells us a ton about the game without saying a word, and also doesn't spoil anything. It's brilliant, really. Immediately afterwards, we rewind time to the beginning. Conker's out at a bar getting plastered with some friends, and his brain-dead girlfriend is at home listening to some loud music and misses Conker's phone call, which he then leaves a message lying about having to see some friends before they go off to fight some war somewhere, which ends up being a plot device later on. Anyway, after too many drinks, Conker throws up and, like all college blackout kings, tries to find his way back home in a state he really shouldn't be traveling in, but whatever. He wakes up in a field the next day completely lost, talking to a scarecrow, and thus begins the entire game's plot of Conker trying to get back home to where his girlfriend is. And oh boy, is it a journey. The gameplay consists of relatively easy to use controls, which have been dumbed down to reduce confusion. The game uses tutorial text heavily in the beginning, but the game is so self-aware that after a few annoyances I picked up that it's literally spoofing its own game genre with giving Conker a manual to read from that supposedly contains all of the information that he needs to know about how he goes about doing things that he already knows how to do but somehow forgot and needs to read aloud so that you can hear. The game goes by the 3-hit rule, and enemies are usually defeated with 3 hits, 3 moves, or some form of the number 3. In order to simplify controls, you're given context-sensitive pads that gives you whatever you need in that moment in time. The game breaks the 4th wall constantly and isn't afraid to spoof anyone or anything, including itself.
Hey, Kostya.
Oh, how much?
Got any Pepsi Pucks?
What?
Dumber.
And makes for a quite humorous experience. Being an action platformer, this game has a lot of jumping and climbing and all of the other platformer type jazz, but also hosts a variety of game types consisting of shooters, puzzle solving, and more. The game doesn't wait to dump its ridiculousness at you. In fact, the beginning of the game seems to throw all of its shock factor at you so that by the time the game starts ramping up, nothing really surprises you. The core game is best at the later half, which is surprising considering most of the iconic parts of the game happen within the first few hours. But after many playthroughs, the end half is just much better technically. The game's controls, while simple to follow, are quite sluggish, and the camera can sometimes be at strange angles that make it a little hard for a platformer. Overall, the game's performance is okay. The frame rate is lower than most, and a few times here and there are drops that can get pretty bad. I attribute this to how gorgeous this game looks, and I mean, no, I don't think Pooh is all that gorgeous in itself, but this game is debatedly the best looking game that was made for the N64 that didn't require the use of an expansion pack. From a technical aspect, this game did things that were not very common at the time. Very few N64 games used actual voice acting and dialogue, let alone having it sync to the character's face. The music in the game is very good and detailed, using MP3s instead of the usual MIDI tracks, resulting in great sound quality. Conker has a variety of facial expressions, both during dialogue and even during his idle animations, whereas most games simply used fixed faces. In fact, let me just list a few of the things that Conker used that others weren't doing. Colored lighting, dynamic shadows, no distance fog, lip syncing, facial animations, character moods, large draw distances in big areas, individually rendered fingers, sound effects based on environment, surround sound, the list goes on. Conker's Bad Fur Day separated itself from other games of its type like Banjo-Kazooie as being more linear and action-based. There aren't a large amount of things to collect, or tons of adventuring. You do have some freedom to explore and find other characters that help advance the game along, but outside of that, everything is pretty linear. Fighting mechanics consist of your trusty frying pan to take down enemies, and there aren't any stacking button combinations to learn. Bosses and levels are often solved by figuring out some sort of puzzle, be it clues in the level or some sort of weakness that you have to exploit. You discover these on your own. Conker has health that consists of bars of chocolate, which float around the levels. This anti-gravity chocolate is explained in a cutscene early on and shows up everywhere. Conker has lives based off of squirrel tails. These are relatively easy to come across and can be abusively stacked if you know where to look, but you're gonna need them later in the game anyway, so stack them up! Characters in the game are all pretty memorable. From beginning to end, each one of them are quite unique and all cause some sort of comedy in one form or another. Here are a few of them that you will meet in the game.
You don't you ever do that again to me!
Yeah, there it is. Over there's big ball of poo. Oh, thanks. You're welcome to it, mate. Yeah, thanks.
Little prick. Right, that's it. Piss off. I've got some cats to see. Bloody things. I hate those bloody cats. The way they meow and they piss everywhere. And their shit smells just bloody awful. All over my fur.
Which reminds me that the plot in this game seems to make absolutely no sense while making all of the sense simultaneously. While Conker is busy being a greedy SOB on his way home, there's a dilemma that is trying to be solved by the Panther King, consisting of a table that keeps spilling his milk. The professor is trying to solve the issue and after many tests concludes that the reason behind this is that there is a gap between the table and the floor. He concludes that the only thing that will fit is a red squirrel, and there we have it, a bunch of yahoos trying to get a red squirrel to replace the table leg. Anyway, Conker makes his way through the world, fighting giant poos, rolling poo up hills, making cows poo, exploding cows, saving the suicidal pitchfork that has no neck, riding a raptor and then forcing said raptor to bite the rump of a giant cyclops, falling in love with the giant, killing a baby dinosaur, peeing on things again, getting drunk, shooting machine guns. This game, it has it all, doesn't it? Conker's Bad Fur Day is a ride some wish would never end. But, like all good parties, once they end, there are prices to pay. Which herein I come to my conclusion. But first, here is some random stuff.
That's incredible.
I mean, what if you were to give this game to, say, 20 intelligent people? I mean, what would that do? Let's face, what would it do?
Really? That's interesting.
9.2 out of 10. A-. Conker's Bad Fur Day is one of those games that will forever be an icon of its time. No other game dared to do what it did during its time period, and still hasn't had anything do something close since its initial release. The gameplay was enjoyable enough, and for most hardcore Conker fans has quite the memorable moments. It was somewhat clunky at times, predictable and extremely linear, limiting what you had available at your disposal. The only thing you carry between areas is a frying pan, and having the context-sensitive zones simply solve your problems for you didn't feel very challenging or rewarding. Although having the spoof of magically having whatever you need wherever you were was quite enjoyable. Visually, this game was, man, it was good for an N64 game. The detail and rigging that went into this one were so beyond what was seen as capable at the time, and it was really a feat in itself. The major downside was the low frame rate, which caused it to look worse than it actually was, but the look of the rendered cutscenes and the character animations were without a doubt some of the best I've seen for this console. Performance-wise, there were some things to nitpick at, such as the low frame rate. It didn't really have a negative impact on the overall experience, but it was noticeable at times when it would drop out. The camera system worked okay, but seemed to get hung up on objects in the foreground and made some sequences harder than they should have been. The game is also locked with an inverted Y-axis control, so if you don't like playing inverted, you're gonna have a bad time. It wasn't a top-tier performance, but certainly not so bad that it was always on my mind. The game story was such a treat, with lots of hidden context and clues that led up to the ending. The game keeps a certain air of mystery from beginning to end, starting with the amazing introduction sequence and movie spoof, and the final ending, which caps and ties together an overall message that the game doesn't convey immediately or right away, but is always hanging in front of you. The way everything unfolds from each area and piece of plot that you get is quite satisfying. The characters in this game and the entire build of the world make it feel like nothing else I've ever played. From each level to the sound and music design and interesting characters, this game really sells its universe and everything contained within it. With Conker breaking the fourth wall and constant self-awareness, I got a sense of feeling that the real world and the world of Conker were one giant hilarious mess that didn't have much distracting me. The main distraction was the slow voice acting, but given the technical difficulties and hardware limitations at the time, was more of a performance issue than anything else. I found myself playing through this game many times due to how charming the world and the game was, but the reality is that this game is quite linear, and after the first playthrough, simply becomes seeing how fast you can complete the tasks that make up each area. There are no new things to really discover, and the way you play and beat the game doesn't really vary. So, the replay value hinges on whether or not the experience of the world is enough for you. Some will be, some won't. But playing through it once or twice is still enjoyable enough, and earns an above average score. Conker's Bad Fur Day is a cult classic that will forever be ingrained in the history of the N64 and Rare's legacy. A vulgar game for a non-vulgar audience that may one day be given its true time to shine. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.